Our Lady of the Flowers by Genet, page 103. Darling was growing pale. He knocked out a pink-cheeked Dutchman to rob him. At the moment, his pocket is full of florins. The garret knows the sober joy that comes from security. Divine and Darling sleep at night. During the day, they sit around naked and eat snacks. They squabble, forget to make love, turn on the radio, which drools on, and smoke. Darling says shit, and Divine, in order to be neighborly, even more neighborly than St. Catherine of Siena, who passed the night in the cell of a man condemned to death, on whose prick her head rested, reads Detective Magazine. Outside, the wind is blowing. The garret is cozily heated by a system of electric radiators, and I should like to give a short respite, even a bit of happiness, to the ideal couple. The window is open on the cemetery. 5 a.m. Divine hears church bells ringing, for she is awake. Instead of notes which fly away, the chimes are strokes, 5 strokes, which drop to the pavement, and on that wet pavement bear Divine with them. Divine, who 3 years before, or perhaps 4, at the same hour, in the streets of a small town, was rummaging through a garbage can for bread. She had spent the night wandering through the streets in the drizzling rain, hugging the wall so as to get less wet, waiting for the Angelus. The bells are now ringing low mass, and Divine relives the anguish of the days without shelter, the days of the bells, which announces that the churches are open to old maids, real sinners, and tramps. In the scented attic, the morning Angelus violently changes her back into the poor wretch in damp tatters, who has just heard Mass and taken communion in order to rest her feet and be less cold. Darling's sleeping body is warm and next to hers. Divine closes her eyes. When the lids join and separate her from the world which is emerging from the dawn, the rain begins to fall, releasing within her a sudden happiness so perfect that she says aloud with a deep sigh, I'm happy. She was about to go back to sleep, but, the better to attest her marital happiness, she recalled without bitterness the memories of the time when she was Coulafroid, when, having run away from the slate house, she landed in a small town, where on golden pink or dreary mornings, tramps with souls, which to look at them one would call naive, of dolls, accost each other with gestures one would call fraternal. They have just got up from park benches on which they have been sleeping, from benches on the main square, or have just been born from a lawn in the public park. They exchange secrets dealing with asylums, prisons, pilfering, and state troopers. The milkman hardly disturbs them. He is one of them. For a few days, Coulafroid was also one of them. He fed on crusts covered with hair that he found in garbage cans. One night, the night he was most hungry, he even wanted to kill himself. Suicide was his greatest preoccupation. The song of phenobarbital. Certain attacks brought him so close to death that I wonder how he escaped it. What imperceptible shock, coming from whom, pushed him back from the brink. But one day there would be, within arm's reach, a phial of poison, and I would have only to put it to my mouth and then to wait with unbearable anguish for the effect of the incredible act, and marvel at the wondrousness of an act so madly irremediable that brings in its wake the end of the world, which follows from so casual a gesture. I have never been struck by the fact that the slightest carelessness, sometimes even less than a gesture, an unfinished gesture, one you would like to take back, to undo by reversing time, a gesture so mild and close still in the present moment that you think you can efface it. Impossible. Can lead, for example, to the guillotine, until the day when I myself, through one of those little gestures that escape you involuntarily, that is impossible to abolish, saw my soul in anguish and immediately felt the anguish of the unfortunate creatures who have no other way out than to confess and to wait and grow calm, because anguish and despair are possible only if there is a visible or a secret way out, and to trust to death as Goulafroy once trusted the inaccessible snakes. Up to that time, the presence of a phial of poison or a high-tension wire had never coincided with periods of dizziness, but Goulafroy and later Devine will dread that moment, and they expect to encounter it very soon, a moment chosen by fate, so that death may issue irremediably from their decision or their lassitude. There were random walks through the town, along dark streets on sleepless nights. He would stop to look through windows at gilded interiors, through lacework illustrated with elaborate designs, flowers, acanthus leaves, cupids with bows and arrows, lace deer, and the interiors, hollowed out in massive and shadowy altars, seemed to him veiled tabernacles in front of and beside the windows, taper-like candelabra mounted, a guard of honor, and still leafy trees which spread out in bouquets of enamel, metal, or cloth lilies on the steps of a basilica altar. In short, they were the surprise packages of vagrant children for whom the world is imprisoned in a magic lattice, which they themselves weave about the globe with toes as hard and agile as Pavlova's. Children of this kind are invisible. Conductors do not notice them on trains, nor do policemen on docks. Even in prison, they seem to have been smuggled in. Like tobacco, tattooing ink, moonbeams, sunbeams, and the music of a phonograph, their slightest gesture proves to them that a crystal mirror, which their fist sometimes bespangles with a silvery spider, encages the universe of houses, lamps, cradles, and baptisms, the universe of humans. The child we are concerned with was so far removed from this that later on all he remembered of his escapade was, in town, women in mourning are very smartly dressed. But his solitude made it possible for him to be moved by petty miseries. A squatting old woman, who, when the child suddenly appeared, pissed on her black cotton stockings. In front of restaurant windows bursting with lights and crystals and silverware, but still empty of diners, he witnessed spellbound the tragedies performed by waiters in full dress, who were dialoguing with a great flourish and debating questions of precedence until the arrival of the first elegant couple, which dashed the drama to the floor and shattered it. Homosexuals who would give him only 50-cent teams and run off full of happiness for a week. In stations at major junctions, he would observe at night from the waiting rooms male shadows carrying mournful lanterns along multitudes of tracks. His feet and shoulders ached. He was cold. Devine muses on the moments which are most painful for the vagabond. At night, when a car on the road suddenly spotlights his poor rags. Darling's body is burning. Devine is lying in its hollow. I do not know whether she is already dreaming or merely reminiscing. One morning, it was at the crack of dawn, I knocked at your door. I was weary of wandering through the streets, bumping into rag pickers, stumbling over garbage. I was seeking your bed, which was hidden in the lace, the ocean of lace, the universe of lace from the far end of the world. A boxer's fist sent me sprawling into a tiny sewer. Just then, the Angelus tolled. Now she's asleep in the lace, and their married bodies are afloat. Here am I this morning, after a long night of caressing my beloved couple, torn from my sleep by the noise of the bolt being drawn by the guard, who comes to collect the garbage. I get up and stagger to the latrine, still entangled in my strange dreams, in which I succeeded in getting my victim to pardon me. Thus, I was plunged to the mouth in horror. The horror entered me. I chewed it. I was full of it. My young victim was sitting near me, and his bare leg, instead of crossing his right, went through the thigh. He said nothing, but I knew without the slightest doubt what he was thinking. I've told the judge everything. You're pardoned. Besides, it's me sitting on the bench. You can confess, and you don't have to worry. You're pardoned. Then, with the immediacy of dreams, he was a little corpse, no bigger than a figurine in an epiphany pie. Then a pulled tooth lying in a glass of champagne in the middle of a Greek landscape with truncated ringed columns, around which long white tapeworms were twisting and streaming like coils. All this in a light seen only in dreams. I no longer quite remember my attitude, but I do know that I believed what he told me. Upon waking, I still had the feeling of baptism. There is no question of resuming contact with the precise and tangible world of the cell. I lie down again until it's time for bread. The atmosphere of the night, the smell rising from the blocked latrines, overflowing with shit and yellow water, stir childhood memories which rise up like a black soil mined by moles. One leads to another and makes it surge up. A whole life which I thought subterranean and forever buried rises to the surface, to the air, to the sad sun, which give it a smell of decay, in which I delight. The reminiscence that really tugs at my heart is that of the toilet of the Slate House. It was my refuge. Life, which I saw far away and blurred through its darkness and smell, an odor that filled me with compassion, in which the scent of the elders and the loamy earth was dominant. For the outhouse was at the far end of the garden, near the hedge. Life as it reached me was singularly sweet, caressing, light, or rather lightened, delivered from heaviness. I am speaking of the life which was things outside the toilet. Whatever in the world was not my little retreat with its worm-eaten boards. It seemed to me as if it were somewhat in the manner of floating, painted dreams, whereas I, in my hole, like a larva, went on with a restful, nocturnal existence, and at times I had the feeling I was sinking, slowly, as into sleep, or a lake, or a maternal breast, or even a state of incest, to the spiritual center of the earth. My periods of happiness were never luminously happy. My peace, never what men of letters and theologians call a celestial peace. That's as it should be, for I would be horrified if I were pointed at by God, singled out by him. I know very well that if I were sick and were cured by a miracle, I would not survive it. Miracles are unclean. The peace I used to seek in the outhouse, the one I am going to seek in the memory of it, is a reassuring and soothing peace. At times it would rain. I would hear the patter of the drops on the zinc roofing. Then my sad well-being, my morose delectation, would be aggravated by a further sorrow. I would open the door a crack, and the sight of the wet garden and the pelted vegetables would grieve me. I would remain for hours squatting in my cell, roosting on my wooden seat, my body and soul prey to the odor and darkness. I would feel mysteriously moved, because it was there that the most secret part of human beings came to reveal itself, as in a confessional. Empty confessionals had the same sweetness for me. Back issues of fashion magazines lay about there, illustrated with engravings in which the women of 1910 always had a muff, a parasol, and a dress with a bustle. It took me a long time to learn to exploit the spell of these nether powers, who drew me to them by the feet, who flapped their black wings about me, fluttering them like the eyelashes of a vamp, and dug their branch-like fingers into my eyes. Someone has flushed the toilet in the next cell. Since our 2 latrines are adjoining, the water stirs in mine, and a whiff of odor heightens my intoxication. My stiff penis is caught in my underpants. It is freed by the touch of my hand, strikes against the sheet, and forms a little mound. Darling, divine, and I am alone here. It is darling whom I cherish most, for you realize that in the final analysis, it is my own destiny, be it true or false, that I am draping, at times a rag, at times a court robe, on divine shoulders. Slowly but surely, I want to strip her of every vestige of happiness, so as to make a saint of her. The fire that is searing her has already burned away heavy bonds. New ones are shackling her. Love. A morality is being born, which is certainly not the usual morality. It is consonant with divine, though it is a morality all the same, with its good and evil. Divine is not beyond good and evil. There where the saint must live, and I, more gentle than a wicked angel, lead her by the hand. Here are some Divini Rihanna, gathered expressly for you. Since I wish to show the reader a few candid shots of her, it's up to him to provide the sense of duration, of passing time, and to assume that during the first chapter she will be between 20 and 30 years of age.